everyone. Hi. We are going. We will continue with the story of Joseph in Genesis 37, verse 23. As Joseph's brothers got jealous and sold him to the merchants of Egypt. So, verse 33. So, as soon as Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his robe, the special robe that he wore, and they took him and threw him into the water pit. At the time, the pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. When they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from the Galilee. Their camel were carrying labdamun gone, balsam, and resinous bark. And they were on their way down to Egypt. At this, Judah said to his brothers, "What profit would there be if we kill our brother and covered over his blood? Come now, let us sell him to the Ishmaelite, and do not let our hand be upon him. After all, he is our brother, our flesh." So they listened to their brother, and when the Midianite merchants were passing by, they lifted Joseph up out of the water pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. These men took Joseph into Egypt. Later, when Reuben returned to the water pit and saw that Joseph was not in the water pit, he ripped his garment apart. When he returned to his brothers, he exclaimed, "The child is gone, and what I am going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the robe into the blood. After that, they sent the special robe to their father and said, "This is what we found. Please examine whether this is your son's robe or not." Then he examined it and exclaimed, "It is my son's robe. A vicious wild animal must have devoured him. Joseph is surely torn to pieces." With that, Jacob ripped his garment apart and put sackcloth around his waist and mourned his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters kept trying to comfort him, but he kept refusing to take comfort, saying, "I will go down into the grave mourning my son." And his father continued weeping for him. So now the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh and the chief of the guard. So Joseph is now in Egypt. About that time, Judah left his brothers and pitched his tent near the Adullamite man named Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite named Shua, so he took her and had relations with her, and she became pregnant. Later she bore a son and and named and he named him Er. Again she became pregnant and bore a son and named him Onan. Yet again she bore a son and named him Shelah. He was in Achzib when she bore him. In time Judah took a wife for her, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was displeasing to Jehovah. So Jehovah put him to death. In view of that, Judah said to Onan, have relations with your brother's wife and perform brother-in-law marriage with her, and raise up offspring for your brothers. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be considered his. So when he did have relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. What he did was bad in the eyes of Jehovah. So he also put him to death. Oh God. Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, dwell as a widow in the house of your father until my son Shelah grow up. For he said to himself, he too may die like his brothers. So Tamar went and stayed in her own father's house. Some time passed, and Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. Judah kept the mourning period, and then he went to his shepherdess and Tamar with his companion Erah, the Adullamite. Tamar was told, here your father-in-law is going up to Tamar to shear his sheep. With that, she removed her widow's clothing and veiled herself and covered herself with a shawl and sat down at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the road to Tamar. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and yet she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah caught sight of her, he at once took her for a prostitute, because she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the word and said, allow me, please, to have relations with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter in law. However, she said, what will you give me that you may have relations with me? To this he said, I will send a young goat from my herd. But she said, will you give a security until you send it? He continued, what security should I give you? To which she said, your seal ring, your cord, and your rod that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her and had relations with her, and she became pregnant by him. After that, she got up and went away and removed her shawl and clothed herself with her widow's clothing. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his companion, the Adullamite, to get back the security from the hand of the woman. But he never found her. He inquired of the men of her place, saying, where is the temple prostitute in a name along the road? But they said, no temple prostitute have ever been in this place. Finally, he returned to Judah and said, I never found her. And besides, the men of the place said, no temple prostitute has ever been in this place. So Judah said, let her take them for herself, in order that we may not fall into contempt. At any wait, I have sent this young goat, but you never found her. However, about 3 months later, Judah was told that Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted as a prostitute, and she is also pregnant by her prostitution. At that, Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. As she was being brought out, she sent words to her father-in-law, I am pregnant by the man to whom this belongs. Then she added, Please examine to whom this belongs, the seal ring and the cord and the rod. Then Judah examined them and said, she is more righteous than I am, because I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he had no further sexual relations with her after that. When the time came for her to give birth, my God. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. As she was giving birth, one put out his hand, and the midwife immediately took uh, a scarlet thread and tied it around his hand, saying, this one came out first. But as soon as he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she exclaimed, what a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, around whose hands the scarlet thread was tied, and he was named Sirah. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and an Egyptian named Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh and chief of the guard, bought him from Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. But Jehovah was with Joseph. As a result, he became successful and was put over the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that Joseph was with him and that Joseph was making everything that he did successful. Joseph kept finding favor in his eyes and became his personal attendant. So he appointed him over his house, and he put him in charge of all that was his. From the time he appointed him over his house and in charge of all that was his, Jehovah kept blessing the house of the Egyptian because of Joseph. And Jehovah's blessing came to be on all that he had in the house and in the field. He eventually left everything that was his in Joseph's care, and he gave no thought to anything except the food he was eating. Moreover, Joseph grew to be well built and handsome. Now, after these things, the wife of his master began to cast her eyes on Joseph and says, lay down with me. But he refused and said to his master, what's wrong with people? Stop calling. And said to his master's wife, here my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has entrusted everything he has into my care. There is no one greater in this house than I am, and he is not withheld from me anything at all except you, because you are his wife. So how could I commit this great badness and actually sin against God? So day after day she spoke to Joseph, but he never consented to lie with her or to remain with her. But on one of the days when he went into the house to do his work, none of the household servants were in the house. Then she grabbed hold of him by his garment and said, lie down with me. But he left his garment in her hands and fled outside. As soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she began to cry out to the men of her house and said to them, look, he brought to us this Hebrew man to make us a laughing stock. He came to me to lie down with me, but I began to cry out at the top of my voice. Then, as soon as he heard me raising my voice and screaming, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. After that, she laid his garment beside her until his master came to his house. Then she told him the same thing, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came to me to make me a laughing stock. But as soon as I raised my voice and began to scream, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. As soon as his master heard the words his wife spoke to him, saying, "These are the things your servant did to me," his anger blazed. So Joseph's master took him and gave him over to the prison, the place where the prisoners of the king were kept under arrest, and he remained there in the prison. But Jehovah continued with Joseph and kept showing loyal love to him and granted him favor in the eyes of chief officer of the prison. So the chief officer of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners in the prison and everything that they were doing there. He was the one having it done. The chief officer of the prison was looking after absolutely nothing that was in Joseph's care. For Jehovah was with Joseph, and Jehovah made whatever he did successful. After these things, the chief cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the chief baker sinned against their lord, the king of Egypt. So Pharaoh grew indignant at his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he committed them to the jail of the house of the chief of the guard, to the place where Joseph was a prisoner. Then the chief of the guard assigned Joseph to be with them and to take care of them, and they remained in jail for some time. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each had a dream on the same night, and each dream had its own interpretation. The next morning, when Joseph came in and saw them, they looked dejected. So he asked the officers of Pharaoh who were in the custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces glooming today?" At this, they said to him, "We each had a dream, but there is no interpreter with us." Joseph said to them, do not interpretation belongs to God. Relate it to me, please." So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Joseph, saying to him, "In my dream, there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were three twigs, and as it was sprouting shoots, it blossomed, and its cluster wept into grape. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them out into Pharaoh's cup. After that, I put the cup in Pharaoh's hands." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation. The 3 weeks are 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will bring you out, restoring you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hands as you did before when you were his cup bearer. Nevertheless, you must remember me when things go well with you. Please show me your love and mention me to Pharaoh in order to get me out of this place. I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and I have not done anything here for which they should put me in prison." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had interpreted something good, he said to him, "I too was in my dream, and there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head, and In the top basket, there were all sorts of baked good for Pharaoh, and there were birds eating them out of the basket on top of my head. Then Joseph answered, "This is its importation. The three baskets are 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will behead you and will hang you on a stake, and the bird will eat your flesh from you." Now, the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he made a feast for all his servants. And he brought out both the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his servant. And he returned the chief cupbearer to his post cupbearer, and he continued to hand the cup to Pharaoh. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. However, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He kept forgetting him. At the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River, and there, coming up from the Nile River, were 7 fine-looking fat cows, and they were feeding on the Nile grass. There were seven other cows that looked ugly and thin coming up after them from the Nile, and they stood alongside the fat cow by the bank of the Nile. Then the ugly, thin cows began to eat up the 7 fine-looking fat cow. At this, Pharaoh woke up. Then he went back to sleep and had a second dream. There were 7 ears of grain coming up on one stalk, full and choice. And growing up after them were 7 ears of grain that were thin and scorched by the east wind. And the thin ears of grains began to swallow up the 7 full and choice ears of grain. At this, Pharaoh woke up and realized that it was a dream. But in the morning, his spirit became agitated, so he sent for all the magic participant priests of Egypt and all her wise men. Pharaoh related his dream to them, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. At that, the chief cupbearer spoke with Pharaoh, saying, "I am confessing my sin today." Pharaoh was indignant at his servant, so he committed me to the jail of the house of the chief of guard, both me and the chief baker. After that, we each had a dream on the same night, and he and I each had a dream with its own interpretation. And there with us was a young Hebrew man, a servant of the chief of the guard. When we related them to him, he interpreted for us the meaning of each dream. It happened exactly as he had interpreted to us. I was restored to my office, but the other man was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and they brought him quickly from the prison. He shaved and changed his clothes and went in to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, but there is no one to interpret it. Now I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it." At this, Joseph answered Pharaoh, "I need not be considered. God will speak concerning Pharaoh's welfare." Pharaoh went on to say to Joseph, "In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and there, coming up from the Nile, were 7 fine-looking fat cows, and they began to feed on the Nile grass. And there were 7 other cows coming up after them, poor and very bad-looking and thin. I was never seen such bad-looking cows in all the land of Egypt. And the skinny bad cow began to eat up the first 7 fat cows. But when they had consumed them, no one could have known that they had done so, since their appearance was just as bad as the start. At that I woke up. After that, I saw in my dream 7 ears of grains coming up on one stalk, full and choice. Growing up after them were 7 ears of shriveled grain, thin and scorched by the east wind. Then the thin ears of grain began swallowed up the 7 choice ears of the grain. So I told it to the magi practicing priest, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of the Pharaoh are one and the same. The true God has told to Pharaoh what he will do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. Likewise, the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. The dream are one and the same. The 7 skinny and bad cows that came after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears of grain, scorched by the east wind, will prove to be 7 years of famine. This is just as I told to Pharaoh. The true God has caused Pharaoh to see what he will do. We're going to stay here and we can continue the next time. We have seen what jealousy is, and one of his brothers who passed away, things who were done, how exactly they were being punished. A lot of things has already been passed. I can't even keep up with how many generations has already uh, um, passed from this on. So now the story of Joseph, which we already know, there and between those years, we also learn about a couple of brothers that Joseph had, and how they too were treated and had children with one of his brothers, and how one was put to death. So Judah, firstborn, he died, and the brother was what religion is that? It's like they're supposed, if the brother passed away, then the next brother can marry the other, can marry the wife who lives on, and if they can have children, and their children will not consider the living brother's children, but it will be considered as the dead brother's child. And because he didn't want his offspring to be considered his brother's children, he then went on. They tell you that he disposed of his sperm on the ground when he has sexual relations with the late brother's wife, so that he doesn't give children to her because they would not be considered his. And God was unhappy with him because he wasn't procreating as he should, because God says procreate and creates us and give Adam Eve so that the population can grow. And him, as he defined God's will and throw away his kid, throw away his sperm, which could have give bring forth children, and because of that, God also kills him. And we also see that this woman later on tricked his father-in-law into having kids with her. so that she can find her own honor, because she was a widow. And I mean, he literally slept with the woman thinking that she was a prostitute, man. And they, I mean, seriously, you go on the street, you see a woman sitting down, you think it's a prostitute, you ask to have sex with the person, and you never raise the woman's veil, you just lay down with the woman and did not even know that was his daughter-in-law. End up finding out all about this. It's like, it's amazing how men does those things. How, I mean, seriously, how could it not even know that he actually was having sexual relation with his daughter-in-law? He never even looked at her face. So this is how demeaning they consider this woman, or although he gives her gifts in return to have sex with her, and but never really cared to look into her face, because he was just laying mating with her. And later on, he found out that he was strict because he was by whatever their custom. So this wife would have married each brother down the line, because her first husband died, the second husband then died. So he, as the father-in-law, was supposed to have her married the next brother, and he did not do that. He kept that son and did not marry her again. So this was somehow displeasing to her, and she went and tricked him into giving her a son, and he actually fell for it without knowing. In the meanwhile, all this was happening. Joseph was then in Egypt, um, in his master's house. And now, as you can hear many times from the story, that says because God favors Joseph, God um, flourish and give more to this man, because God was working with Joseph. God was making sure that Joseph was safe. And because of the blessing of Joseph from God, this man was also blessed. So you who are out there, who's living a life with God, somebody who's next to you can benefit from the blessings of God. And that happens so many times. So it's your blessing can be shared with those that are in your life. And when you are no longer there, that blessings, because you were the one who they were benefiting these blessings from. And now that they have removed you, and it's no longer the same, because God was with Joseph, not God favors Joseph. And because God favors Joseph, Joseph was making his master very rich, and he had so much. And now that Joseph wasn't there anymore, so Joseph went on to the jail, and now the jail master then was the one who was benefiting from the grace of God from that. And now Joseph is going to be with Pharaoh. He moved on with his blessing, with God's blessing, to Pharaoh's house. So think of it like this as well. You, as a Christian, as a human being, when you follow God, you accept Jesus, God blesses you, and those in your life will also benefit from your blessing. For God promised to those who accept Jesus, who love Jesus, that he will continue to give them blessings. And by that, people who are in your life will actually be benefiting from those blessings. They will prosper as well. And that doesn't mean the person is a good person, but because God will not let you down, then they will benefit from it. So you have to also think of that. Be careful who you exactly gets from your blessing. Is the same thing that many have says that some bad people who are around you, their bad omen can also be transferred to you. So it's biblical. That also happened to Jacob when his father-in-law was switching the flocks so that he can store the goods. God was mysteriously, with his power, switching the blessing from from the flocks to make sure that Jacob is the one who's always getting the blessing and not this his father-in-law, because the father-in-law was cheating Jacob. First he cheated him, having worked for him for many years, and then decided to tell him, well, didn't you know the older daughter has to marry first, and then he had to work another bunch of years to get the woman that he wanted. And after that, he ended up working for him, and he was still cheating Joseph unknowingly. And Jacob, I mean, and God, Jacob wasn't even aware that he was switching the flocks on him, so that he can prosper and Jacob would not have much. So God, within his power, who knows everything, who knows who we are, who knows our actions, knows when we are trying to trick other people, when we're doing bad things to them. And God, when you are a Christian, when you believe in Jesus, when you accept God, God is working its power within you. That those are the things. Sometimes you don't even realize it. All that Jacob knows is that his flocks will always prosper, but the Bible tells you God was doing so. God was doing so and told Jacob this is what was going on. So in those cases, in people, I would, when I read the story, I think of people in my country, in Haiti, and people who are doing bad to you. Okay, they don't know that God is watching. They don't care about that. They keep doing bad things to you. And then when they realize that they're trying to do bad to you and the bad thing that they're doing to you is not happening, then they start saying that you are evil, you serving the devil, because when they're trying to hurt you, it's not happening. They never think that God is almighty, God is all over the place, God is omnipresent and see our heart and knows what we are doing. And when you're trying to hurt a Christian, when you're trying to hurt a child of God, God is acting. So it is not, stop giving praises to the evil people. Satan has nothing to do with him. I hate seeing when people are doing bad things, and next thing you know, they start giving praise to Satan. Satan didn't do nothing. It's not the devil that's doing it. It's God that's making sure that your wickedness does not succeed, because you are wicked, you're trying to hurt an innocent person. God will not allow it. And you, because you're wicked and you don't really know God, you start praising the devil because you're not succeeding. And you will not succeed when you try to hurt people that are with God. You will never succeed. You will never succeed. And next thing you know, you start saying that the person he's going to do voodoo. That's why you, when people, that's most likely when people try telling you that you evil, know that they are the one who's trying to hurt you. When people are trying to tell you, oh my God, she's so bad or he's so bad, That's when you know that they were the one attacking you and pull you were doing nothing. It's because they could not succeed. Then they decide to claim that you are bad, you the evil one. That happens so many times. And why exactly does that happen? Why exactly these things happen? The Bible says it. God Almighty's hands is always there guiding and shifting the wickedness of man from his beloved children. So you, if you are doing something to somebody else that's wrong, change it. Do not get bad cursed. Do not get God be angry with you to take away his blessing that he has for you because you're doing wicked things. So think of those things. Think. Think of these things that we are doing that are no good. Think about how we decide that we're going to affect other people with our lives, with the things that we say, thinking that, oh, nobody's going to know, I'm just going to succeed into doing the wrong thing. There is a God. There is a God that's been watching, and it's in the record. I mean, the Bible is the most famous book that has ever existed. Jesus is the most popular celebrity of all kind. I love Jesus. I love Jesus so much. He's my favorite celebrity because him, from generation to generation, since the beginning, he's been in our face. He came to earth. We've been talking about him. We've been talking about his grace, his glory. People gather into his names. He's one of the most powerful, the most known celebrity, the most loved celebrity by many. Even if those who claim that he does not exist, that God does not exist, they're fooling themselves. For it's engraved. And he says, the words in the heaven will pass, but my words will never fade. For Jesus is the Almighty. He would never fade. His words, everything that he is, will remain. So know that in our heart, as we love Jesus, as we accept Jesus, from history to from everything we've learned from Genesis, from our ancestors, how blessings comes about, how God take his blessing away from us. We should learn how to live so that we can keep our blessings, so we do not get God anger, so we can continue to be blessed. This is the things that we learn. We also learn from the mistake of our forefather and try to not repeat those things. All right? And the things that we've done. Times have changed so much, and we must learn from them. And with that says, we ask God to continue to eliminate us, to read and to learn from him, so we can know what to do, how to behave, learn from our past, and to praise Jesus Christ, to give praise and glory to Jehovah. And with God, we will continue, just like Joseph has that blessing with him from God, that we continue to have God's blessing, God's love, because God told us, if we love him, if we serve him, we proclaim his name, we proclaim his words with our mouth, we will be blessed. He will know us as we know Jesus. Jesus is the only way. If we know Jesus, we will know God. We will feel it. We will know that he is in our life. Without knowing, things will happen for you. That I have lived. I have lived it to myself in my life. You know Jesus, things will happen for you in your life without knowing. So with that says, I leave you with that. remember to give thanks and praise to Jesus Christ for dying for us and redeemed us and give us, those who love him, who accept him, a direct connection with our Creator. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you all. Thank you. I'll see you next Saturday.